Good evening. This is our last lecture, lecture 7 in Literary Text 313. In this lecture, we're going to study a new poem by the African American poet Maya Angelou. The poem is called I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. As we are used to, what we do first is to read the text all through without worrying about difficult words and try to get a general idea about what the poem is about, what feeling does it give us, and then we can start understanding it line by line. Caged Bird by Maya Angelou. A free bird leaps on the back of the wind and floats downstream till the current ends and dips his wing in the orange sun rays and dares to claim the sky. But a bird that stalks down his narrow cage can seldom see through his bars of rage. His wings are clipped and his feet are tied, so he opens his throat to sing. The caged bird sings with a fearful trill of things unknown but longed for still, and his tune is heard on the distant hill, for the caged bird sings of freedom. The free bird thinks of another breeze, and the trade winds soft through the sighing trees, and the fat worms waiting on a dawn bright lawn, and he names the sky his own. But a caged bird stands on the grave of dreams, his shadow shouts on a nightmare scream, his wings are clipped and his feet are tied, so he opens his throat to sing. The caged bird sings with a fearful trill of things unknown but longed for still, and his tune is heard on the distant hill, for the caged bird sings of freedom. Now this is the poem by the African American poet Maya Angelou, who was born in 1928 and died 2014. Her poem I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings could be interpreted as a poem on racial discrimination in the United States of America, and could equally be read as a poem about different kinds of oppression all over the world. But before reading it, let us think of what the whole poem is about. Ask questions like, is it a story? Is it a dialogue? Is it a description of a place? And even if there are words that you don't know, at least you can see that there are two birds, one free, one caged, and you can see that there is a comparison between both. And of course the word freedom recurs throughout the poem, so we know we are speaking about birds and freedom, which is an association that is almost universal. Okay, let's read the first stanza and try to think what it is about. A free bird leaps on the back of the wind and floats downstream till the current ends and dips his wing in the orange sun rays and dares to claim the sky. Now, if you look at the verbs to start with, the verbs are all verbs leaps, floats, dips, and dares. They are all verbs of movement. The stanza is, although the poem is about the caged bird, the first stanza is about the free bird, and the free bird here is described not in metaphors or similes, but described in its movement, and we can see how free the movement is, and its movement in different places. A free bird leaps on the back of the wind. So here we have the image of the free bird as flying, and leaps, to leap is to jump. It's not just to fly, but also to jump, maybe imparting some sort of happiness and energy and so on. So a free bird leaps on the back of the wind. It's like it's also playing. It is riding the wind. So here the free bird, while it's flying, and floats downstream till the current end. Downstream is with the current, مع التيار. Downstream is مع التيار. Upstream is ضد التيار. So it's floating in, to float is to like swim on the top of the water. So to float, يطفو. So it floats. It's not even making the effort of swimming. It is just floating, and floating in the easy way, downstream. بيطفو على مع التيار. It's not making any effort to swim or to struggle or anything. So it floats downstream till the current ends. So it leaves itself. It has all the time and space to move until the current اللي هو التيار ends, and dips his wing in the orange sun rays. The orange sun rays, we're speaking about the morning, yes, in the sun, and it's orange. It's not too hot, it's not cold, and dares to claim the sky. So the first stanza describes the free bird rather than the caged bird, introducing the comparison between both free and caged birds that will dominate the rest of the poem. Yes, we will have one stanza for the free bird, one for the caged bird, and we will be comparing them. The description of the free bird is presented through a series of sensory images signifying freedom of movement and happiness and courage as a result. So we're going to see how these series of sensory images, and I hope you remember what sensory images are. I will just remind you of our first lecture and how we divided imagery into two categories: comparisons and sensory images. Comparisons are like simile, metaphor, and personification, when we compare one thing to another. While sensory images, and these we are going to use a lot here, are divided into visual, that is an image that you can see. So I give you a line that brings, or the poet writes a line that brings an image that the reader can see. Auditory, something that you can hear. Olfactory, something that you can smell. Tactile, something that you can touch. Gustatory, something that you can that you can taste. And kinesthetic is a description of movement. Here, for example, is a visual image, that is an image that you can see when I say the endless crowds of people filling every spot in the street. Here I'm not comparing anything to, I'm not saying that people were like ants, for example. ناس زي النمل, I'm just describing the people, but this description brings to the reader an image. An auditory image is when you read a line and then you feel as if you're hearing. If I speak about the tweeting of birds in early morning, in your mind you can hear the birds. The click clack of a lady's high heels coming up the stairs, again you can hear this in your mind. The smell of spilled coffee, we all know it, so we almost, when we read this line, we almost smell the coffee, or the smell of the sea 2 kilometers before reaching it. The kinesthetic is important in this poem, and kinesthetic means an image of movement. So I'm describing how things move, or people move, or so on. So a description like this one: kicking her right leg forward with pointed toes and flex calf muscles, the dark-haired girl pivoted in a revolving whirl of sharp precision and accurate grace. The entirety of her being began advancing in movement with clarity and control. This is an image of a girl dancing and going round in whirl كأن دوامة, of sharp precision and accurate grace, perhaps like a ballet dancer. So and she is on her toes, and I'm sure you've seen this before. Reading this, you get the image of this girl dancing, and this is what we call a kinesthetic image, or an image of movement. And in this poem we have many such images. Let's go back to our poem. A free bird leaps on the back of the wind and floats downstream till the current ends, and dips his wings in the orange sun rays and dares to claim the sky. In these 5 lines, this bird is moving from air to river, and is we also have the last line, something about its feelings. So the first image is the image of the bird riding playfully on the wind, كأنه بيركب على الرياح بشكل بيلعب. A free bird leaps on the back of the wind and floats downstream till the current ends. بيطفو على النهر، الطيار هو اللي بيشيله، مش مضطر انه هو يسبح او يعمل اي مجهود. And dips his wing in the orange sun rays. To dip is to put. So he when flying, he puts his wing in the sun, and the sun is orange. Seeing here is also a visual image and not just an image of movement. You can see the river, you can see the morning, and all these add up into dares to claim the sky. To dare is to have the courage، يجرؤ على. فلأنه بيتحرك كل الحركة دي وعنده كل هذه النعم من المية والنور وكل ده، he dares to claim the sky. بيعتبر انه كل هذه السماء ملكه. To claim something is to say it is mine. So he believes the sky to be his. The lines use verbs of movement, leaps, floats, drawing kinesthetic images. Consequently, the bird gains courage as a result of its free movement. Because the bird is moving, because It can go on the wind and come back to the river, and has the sun as an orange color to dip its wing in. It feels that all this belongs to itself. So consequently, the bird gains courage as a result of its free movement, and we have this expressed by the verb dares. The weather is described as clear and lovely, orange sun rays, with wind that helps in flying. Now, all these are not only kinesthetic images, as I said, but also visual images. And all the surroundings of the free bird are favorable and encouraging. The image that we get from all this stanza is an image almost of heaven. We then move to the second stanza. But a bird that stalks down his narrow cage can seldom see through his bars of rage. His wings are clipped and his feet are tied, so he opens his throat to sing. And here we come to the caged birds. A bird that stalks down his narrow cage. To stalk is to walk proudly. You don't just you're not just walking, but you're walking slowly and proudly. إنه يخطو بكبرياء. Now this bird in a cage can seldom see through his bars of rage. Seldom means almost not, hardly. His wings are clipped, the wings are tied, and his feet are tied. He cannot move his wings as opposed to the free bird that dips its wing in the orange sun ray, and the feet are tied as opposed to the feet of the free bird that is carried by the current and carried by the wind. So he opens his throat to sing. The second stanza presents the image of the caged bird as one with confined movement within a narrow cage. And this is another visual and kinesthetic image. Yes, we have the narrow cage described. Once we have this line, we can see the narrow cage. However, there are two things that the caged bird does and the free bird does not. And I hope you have already recognized them. The free bird does not do in spite of all its freedom. The caged bird stalks, that is, walks proudly, يخطو بكبرياء, and sings, يشدو. This last action is one that we never see the free bird doing, and it is actually presented in this stanza as if it is a result of being imprisoned. Let's go line by line and see the second line has a metaphor comparing the anger of the bird to a metaphorical prison. Here is a comparison, metaphor, مجاز. In addition to the real prison, the bars of this metaphorical prison are made of anger. The image shows how anger, probably against an oppressor, could be a prison in itself. Let's see. The bird stalks in his narrow cage, can seldom see through his bars of rage. The word bars of rage, قضبان الغضب. So it is not the real bars, the iron bars, but rage is creating bars. The rage is compared to the iron bars of the prison. في مقارنة ما بين الغضب وما بين قضبان السجن. فكأنه الغضب بيخلق قضبان من بيخلق سجن تاني لهذا الطائر. So if you have to analyze this image, you say that rage is compared to the iron bars, and so the bird is not just imprisoned in the cage, it is also imprisoned in its own anger. Its anger imprisons it. It does not, the anger makes it unable to do anything, unable to love, unable to be happy, and so on. So here you have this metaphor comparing rage to a prison, to the bars of a prison or a cage. And these bars make the bird unable to see. So he is so angry he cannot see the outside world. His wings are clipped and his feet are tied. These are visual images. You can imagine when reading this line that the bird is tied with its wings. We then come to the last line that introduces the one action that the caged bird does and the free bird does not do, namely sing. The action of singing is introduced with the word so. The poet is saying the bird is caged, it cannot walk, it cannot move, and so because of all these things he opens his throat to sing. So singing is presented as a result of being in the cage, of being oppressed. Here singing is not an expression of happiness. Singing is an expression of sadness, singing one's sadness or blues. I hope you know the word blues in English means sadness, and it is also the kind of singing, it's the genre of singing that the African Americans sing. So blues is typical of African Americans who have a special genre of singing called blues, and it's a very sad kind of singing. If one compares the actions or the verbs of the free bird and those of the caged bird, one would find that the free bird moves all over the place, from land to sky to water. On the other hand, the only action that the caged bird is capable of doing is to sing. So as opposed to the movement, you have the singing. And the singing, as we're going to see in the next stanza, gets the caged bird to move. In a sense, the singing becomes the caged bird way of movement, as the poet will explain in the following stanza on the caged bird. The caged bird sings with a fearful trill of things unknown but longed for still, and his tune is heard on the distant hill, for the caged bird sings of freedom. So here the poet is telling us something about the song, and the song is loud, it has a trill, but fearful. It's not something that is cheerful, but the opposite. And he is singing of things unknown but longed for still. To long for something means to want it very much. يشتاق إلى أو يتوق إلى شيء is to long for, as a verb and not as an adjective. Of course, you all know long as an adjective, but as a verb means يتوق إلى أو يشتاق إلى. So the bird is singing of things that it does not know, but it longs for, it wants it. It does not know freedom. It has always been caged. But not knowing something does not mean you don't want it, or you don't miss it. And his tune is heard on the distant hill, for the caged bird sings of freedom. His tune is heard on the distant hill. Here we can see that the song gets the caged bird moving, because if he cannot move in his cage, his his song goes up to the hill and moves beyond the cage. This stanza describes the kind of song sung by the caged bird. It is, ironically, a song about freedom, which the caged bird has never experienced, things unknown, yet desires to experience, longed for. The previous stanza has told us that because the caged bird does not have freedom of movement like the free bird, it sings. In this stanza, we are told that the song and the voice manage to take the bird beyond its cage as its voice travels far out of the cage. His tune is heard on the distant hill. Singing is thus the caged bird's metaphor for movement. The caged bird does not move, but his voice does move. We go back to the free bird and see what he is doing, and the free bird thinks of another breeze, and the trade winds soft through the sighing trees, and the fat worms waiting on a dawn bright lawn, and he names the sky his own. Here we have more images of the favorable environment of the free bird. The free bird is living in extremely favorable environment. He thinks of another breeze. Breeze نسمة أو رياح. So now that he is on that kind of wind, he wants another kind of wind. So he's moving from one freedom to another freedom, if you like. The free bird thinks of another breeze, and the trade winds soft through the sighing trees. And he's thinking of the trade winds. The trade winds is the name of a kind of winds, الرياح التجارية. And these winds are not hard, it's only soft. They are very nice and very kind to the bird, and they are moving through the sighing trees. Here that you can speak of this as a personification. The trees are sighing تتنهد. So it's an image of the wind moving into the trees, making the trees like a sighing person. وكأنه حركة الرياح على الشجر بتخليها كأنها إنسان بيتنهد، كأن الشجر بيتنهد زي الإنسان. So again, it's probably a sigh of relief rather than a sigh of sadness. We have everything favorable here. And the fat worms waiting on a dawn bright lawn. The lawn اللي هو الأرض المزروعة بالحشائش. The fat worms waiting on a dawn bright lawn. So it's in the time is the dawn, الفجر, and so starting from the very early morning, the free bird wakes up and finds the fat worm, the very good food for it, waiting for it to take it. It does not have to work all day in order to get food. From the very early morning, it has its food waiting for it. And again, we have the same line repeated in different words. He names the sky his own. Remember, in the first line, it was, in the first stanza, it was he claims the sky. Here he names the sky his own. He decides that this whole world is his. Of course, you can see that the poet is not describing any risks or dangers that the free bird could be subjected to. Having its food, having the winds. There are no dangerous winds. there are no traps, for example, مصايد. It's all very favorable. All the environment of the free bird is described as 100% favorable, no risks, no dangers, no hardship, no work even. From the very morning, early morning, he has his food ready. The fourth stanza, the poet goes back to the free bird. With more sensory images, the favorable conditions of the free bird are described. If you want to think of the what sensory images, you can think of the wind. The free bird moves with one wind to another, thus not making much effort in flying as the wind aids it or helps it. From the early morning, dawn, اللي هو الفجر, the free bird can go to where it can find delicious food, fat worms. It does not need to work all day before finding its food. The food is there waiting for it from the early morning. All this luck and favorable conditions give the free bird a sense of power and confidence. The free bird feels as if the world was created for it alone. He names the sky his own. He feels it's all this world is his own home. Yet of all the things the free bird is capable of doing, it never sings. Singing in this poem is left as the privilege of the bird expressing its pain. Yes, privilege means امتياز أو حاجة خاصة بشخص. Of course, this is not very realistic, but this is what this poet wants to tell us, that singing is the privilege of the caged bird. Usually when you read this, the title of the poem, I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, you think, why could the caged bird sing? We would know, we always have this image of the free bird singing because it's happy. A bird that is on the tree and flying and having the company of other birds sings out of happiness, and we always interpret the singing of birds as an action of an expression of happiness. Now the poet, as all poetry does, gives us a different interpretation of the singing. First, it silences the free bird, this bird that is moving from one place to another and happy and believing that this world is hers, does not need to sing. The bird that needs to sing is the bird that is caged, and it is singing a sad song of pain. We go back in this stanza to the caged bird. But a caged bird stands on the grave of dreams. His shadow shouts on a nightmare scream. His wings are clipped and his feet are tied. So he opens his throat to sing. This stanza has very painful images describing the caged birds. And it also ends with the same line again. He opens his throat to sing, and with a so, that is, as a result of all this pain, the caged bird sings. Let's look at it line by line. A caged bird stands on the grave of dreams. The grave of dreams, قبر الأحلام. So this is a clear metaphor describing dreams as a person and a dead person buried, and the bird is another person mourning, meaning not الصباح but mourning, M-O-U-R-N, meaning yarthi. So this bird is standing on the grave of the dreams, its own dreams. فكأنه بيصور هذا الطائر على انه شخص واقف بينعي او يرثي احلامه المدفونة في هذا القبر اللي هو واقف قصاده. A caged bird stands on the grave of dreams. His shadow shouts on a nightmare scream. This is another image that shows the shadow of the bird. So if he is a person mourning his dead dreams, his shadow is another person that is shouting, screaming on a nightmare scream. So not only the bird but even its shadow is in terrible pain. One is mourning dead dreams and the other is shouting on a nightmare scream. Nightmare اللي هو الكابوس، فهو بيصرخ من كابوس بيعاني منه. So these two very painful images describe how the caged bird spends its time as opposed to the very favorable environment of the free bird. And then we repeat the line, his wings are clipped and his feet are tied, so he opens his throat to sing. Because of all this pain, the physical pain of the clipped wings and the tied feet, the psychological pain of standing on the grave of dreams, having to be sad for the dreams that never came true and will never come true because they are dead, and the pain of the constant nightmares. Because of all this, one sings. A bird does not sing because it's happy as we all think. A bird sings because it is in terrible pain. In the fifth stanza, the one that we just read, the poet introduces very painful images of the caged bird. In the first line, the caged bird is portrayed as a mourner at the graves. Mourner الشخص اللي بيرثي أو ينعي شخص توفى. In the first line, the caged bird is portrayed as a mourner at the grave. The dead person here is the dreams of the bird. So here you have a metaphor comparing the dreams of the bird as a loved dead person. In a metaphor, the dreams of the bird are compared to a dead person who has been buried, and the bird is mourning that death at the graveyard. The second line introduces another painful image. Not only is the bird in mourning, but its shadow expresses terrible pain, shouting as a result of a nightmare, probably the nightmare of oppression and imprisonment. The caged bird sings with a fearful trill of things unknown but longed for still, and his tune is heard on the distant hill, for the caged bird sings of freedom. This stanza is repeated for the second time, and it is, I think when we read it this time, we read it with all the pain that we have learned about the caged bird, but it also gives us some hope. I think that the caged bird is capable of singing for a very important value, that is freedom, and that its singing is not futile. Futile means لا جدوى له, because its tune is heard on the distant hill. صوته والنغم اللي هو بيصدره ممكن الناس تسمعه في بعيدا عن القفص اللي هو محبوس فيه. In the distant hill, في الجبال البعيدة، فصوته بيتردد إلى لغاية الجبال البعيدة وبيتسمع هناك. And this is, as we said, is his way of movement. Before speaking about the poem, generally I would like to read it once more as a whole, and then we can speak about it generally. A free bird leaps on the back of the wind and floats downstream till the current ends, and dips his wing in the orange sun rays and dares to claim the sky. But a bird that stalks down his narrow cage can seldom see through his bars of rage. His wings are clipped and his feet are tied, so he opens his throat to sing. The caged bird sings with a fearful trill of things unknown but longed for still, and his tune is heard on the distant hill, for the caged bird sings of freedom. The free bird thinks of another breeze, and the trade winds soft through the sighing trees, and the fat worms waiting on a dawn-bright lawn, and he names the sky his own. But a caged bird stands on the grave of dreams, his shadow shouts on a nightmare scream, his wings are clipped and his feet are tied, so he opens his throat to sing. The caged bird sings with a fearful trill of things unknown but longed for still, and his tune is heard on the distant hill, for the caged bird sings of freedom. This is Maya Angelou's poem, I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. And I suppose, as I told you, when we read the first line, we think, why would a caged bird sing? A caged bird is supposed to be sad. We always think of the free bird that sings and that is happy. Now we have an answer. The caged bird sings expressing its sadness and trying to ask for the freedom that is its right. Of course, the whole poem can be read symbolically. Maya Angelou is not really speaking about birds. In real life, we know that caged birds, just as like free birds sing, and in the poem they don't. So the poem is not really about birds, it is about human beings, as we can guess. It can be read literally about the difference between free and caged bird, but of course it can also be read symbolically as the difference between people who have suffered oppression and people who are lucky enough to live a life of abundance and freedom. Of course, when you apply it to Maya Angelou's environment, Maya Angelou is an African American poet, and you can think of all the oppression that African and Black Americans were subjected to until they gained some of the rights through the civil rights movement in the 1960s, but up till now there is discrimination and privileges for the whites even there. So she is expressing her people's suffering, but one can read this poem without thinking of without thinking only of Black or African Americans, but thinking of all oppressed people, all imprisoned people, all people who do not have their rights, and why they have to scream in singing, if you like, to express their desire for freedom and their desire for a better life which they deserve. Thank you very much, and hope you have enjoyed this poem by Maya Angelou.